Hey guys, welcome to another Symbolic Studies live stream. I'm your host Mario. Hope you're doing well today. We've got a good one for you. This one is for the tarot nerds out there. We're going to be exploring the Spanish tarot tradition with my buddy Dave, or who I affectionately call Tattoo Dave. But before we get to that, I do have a couple of things to announce. So let me switch to that here. If my internet will cooperate with me. There we go. All right, so here we are. As always, if you want to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/symbolicstudies. I would really appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of my current patrons, including Amy, Troy, Amanda, Chance, Abby, Nicholas, Yakov, Moonlander, who is Dave, Tattoo Dave, Sarah, Julia, Lockstep, Claire, Hazel Mandala, LS, Judy, Barbara, Adrian, Christina, Kurt, AC Slayer, Peter, Mia, Miriam, Hank, Juan, Natalie, and Julian. Thank you guys so much. It honestly, every single patron's subscription means quite a bit over here. So much love to all of you guys. And with that said, let me give you a quick background on my relationship with Dave here. So I met Dave over 10 years ago for the first time in a friend's backyard. It was a little barbecue. We had a mutual friend. And it's funny because I do remember meeting him. I don't know if we talked at length about anything that night. I recognized his face though, and I would run into him multiple times over the years. And turns out we have both a mutual interest in the tarot and magic and occultism and things like that. And we have some friends that are interested in the same type of material. And so over the years, I got to know Dave. And as I started symbolic studies, I would get emails from Dave on occasion regarding specific cards, specific insights, and I really valued his feedback. There were a few things that he mentioned that I thought were very, very interesting. And it turns out Dave is really into the tarot and has quite the collection. And so I figured might as well bring him on and start talking about some of this stuff in a public sort of format because he has a lot of information about a lot of things that I am not that familiar with, including the Spanish tarot tradition. And so there are certain decks and there are certain things that come out of this tradition that I want to discuss. And so Dave has taken photos of a lot of his decks, and we're going to get into it here with a little slideshow. But before we do that, let's bring Dave onto the stream. Hey,
Hello,
buddy.
everyone. Hey, good
How
to
you
see
doing,
you.
man?
I'm,
Yeah, you too.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man, for joining me.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on. This is quite an honor.
Yeah, you got it. So, first off, how's your day coming along, dude?
It's good. It's the start of a 4-day weekend for me, so I'm
Ooh, right on.
not going to complain.
Actually, is this kind of appropriate? Did we meet? Was
Sure.
that barbecue meetup a 4th of July meetup by chance?
It was 4th of July. Yeah,
Right. So that's pretty cool.
yeah.
So maybe tell the people a little bit about your relationship with the tarot.
Okay. First of all, I should just put it out there. I'm not a professional tarot reader at all. I'm not even much of an amateur reader. I do read for myself and I've read for friends, but for me, mostly my interest is just sort of the aesthetics of tarot. I love the artwork and I love the symbolism, and I'm always interested in the archetypes I find and
Right.
deeper meanings and images. And I've only really been interested in tarot since about 2014, so it's pretty new for me still. And probably like most people in the U.S., anyways, I started with a Rider-Waite deck, and um, and yeah, I just fell in love with the images and
Right.
started seeing more. And yeah,
And we're both really lucky too because at the time when we met, I lived in Portland, Oregon, and Portland has the Northwest Tarot Symposium. So I'm sure you picked up a lot of decks over there, right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's really cool. It's this tarot conference, this symposium, right? But some of the vendors there were absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, we lost a really good one because he would import a lot of decks from Europe and everything else. But there's people who sell used decks that, I've never seen anywhere in my life before. I'm not an expert on, exactly what's out there, and it's a whole rabbit hole, right? I mean, it's one of these
Yeah,
things. It's just like any hobby. You can spend a lot of time, a lot of money buying these decks, collecting them, all that kind of stuff. But the symposium is probably where I've gotten like half of my like most favorite decks that I
yeah.
have around.
I've definitely found some treasures there. And also have to admit, I found some treasures on eBay as well.
Oh, I
Um,
bet.
yeah, and I've been lucky to find some things on eBay that I was surprised to find for a pretty decent price, and couldn't pass them up. So, and that's where my story with the Spanish decks pretty much starts.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, well, let's get into that. So, this is kind of some territory that I'm not entirely familiar with, and you have been bringing it to my attention as of late. And then you were generous enough to gift me one of these decks, which I'm really, really kind of like falling in love with, symbolically and aesthetically. And we'll get into that here in a bit. But how would you describe this Spanish tarot tradition, this line of different types of decks, and maybe too, are there any qualities that you see that kind of exist between them all, or do they kind of do their own thing? Just kind of let us know what you think about all that.
Yeah, it's interesting as far as the qualities between them. They're I, with none of these decks, I could say there's a strict one-to-one connection between them, but they all share little different qualities that make them stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Like some share different astrological associations, while others will share different Kabbalistic associations with the Hebrew alphabet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the the main thing I could say to distinguish them is actually to tell you what they're not, and
Ah.
they're not Golden Dawn.
Right.
That's really the crux of the matter. I think is these come out of what's generally called the continental tradition, which would be like your decks from Italy and France, like the Marseille deck. Um, so they kind of come out of that tradition, and they go off on a different branch when the Golden Dawn goes off on their branch.
Mm.
So they're in a lot of ways they're more related to like the Marseille deck, particularly. Like you'll see that in some of the majors, the trump cards. Um,
Got it.
but yeah, it's unfortunately the best way I could describe it is non-Golden Dawn.
No worries. No worries. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, as you've been sending me these cards, the correspondences that are associated with the cards,
Yeah,
and including the astrological correspondence, right, and the planetary, very different from what I'm used to. And some of it still has me scratching my head, but
absolutely.
I'm giving these creators, the benefit of the doubt, and I'm assuming clearly that they have a very, very good reason why they changed some of the correspondences or why they're different than the Golden Dawn tradition or Golden Dawn system. And so to me, that is one of the things that I find the most fascinating is just to see the different, Hebrew letters that are associated with the card, the different signs that are associated with the card. And some of them to me, just because I have been steeped in more of the other traditions, I feel like I need to just kind of study them more and spend more time with them and kind of have an understanding of where they're coming at with
Mm-hmm.
everything. And so that's the first thing that kind of stuck out to me kind of immediately. And then also I'll say that I think there's decks from all over the world, that are very eccentric or whatever. But there is a special kind of artistic flair, I would say, with some of these decks that you've shown me. That kind of resonates, and to me kind of feels a little bit more Spanish in origin too.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to Spain, Michelle and I, a handful of years ago, we were in Barcelona. That was one of the cities we were in. And Barcelona is like the home of Antoni Gaudi, and his architecture is like incredible. It's amazing. It's very, very different than what you're going to see. It's very abstract, but it's very flowy, and he just has his complete own style, And then also too, we didn't get a chance to make it over to the Dali Museum, but there's a Dali Museum in Barcelona as well. And I'm like, whoa, that's really interesting. Gaudi, his style of architecture is very, very intriguing and unique. Dali's artwork obviously is very unique. And then I know too, Picasso lived in Spain for a bit as well. And then there's just obviously just the art history there. There's a lot to unpack, lots of amazing artists. So also too is really interesting just going from Ireland to England to France to Spain. It's like the hotter it got, the more eccentric the public art was getting, and just kind of like just the overall vibe was completely changing. And so I think I see some of that in some of these decks here, in some of the artwork.
How much of that do you think is like can be attributed to Spain being such like a cultural melting pot,
Right.
in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, both, before the Moors were kicked out, there was such a blending of, not just Christianity and Judaism, but Islam as well, all living in relative harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And, how much could that have impacted their culture in such amazing ways?
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I'm not the one to answer that, but I like your line of questioning here.
Yeah.
And thinking. So, absolutely, I know that was the interesting thing too. Seeing the Moorish influence on some of these towns and everything else, and some of the very clear esoteric influence on some of the public works, some of the public artwork and stuff. It blew my mind what they decided to make statues on. And the further south we got to, we ended up in a town called Granada, which is Spanish for pomegranate.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were pomegranates everywhere, pomegranate artwork all over the place. It was really incredible. And people who are into esoteric symbolism would know that the pomegranate shows up, in a number of places within the tarot,
Yeah.
And even the Spanish flag has a pomegranate down below, I believe. So there's all of that. But yeah, no, I think you're totally spot on. The cultural sort of mixing pot concept, if you will, for sure, must have had a huge influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see here. Would you say that the same way you're referring to it as the Spanish tarot tradition, the same could be said about, or you let me know about an Italian tradition, a French tradition, or do you think there's something specifically unique about these Spanish decks?
That's a really good question. Personally, and this is just my own opinion, I think there is something very specific about these Spanish decks that, I don't know, sort of makes them more like a family than say the French decks or the Italian decks. I'm not sure I could put my finger on it though, but
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I was just gonna say maybe let's just start exploring some of these decks and some of the artwork, and you let me know what you see, what you think makes them special, how they might differentiate from other types of decks, how it might be unique to this Spanish tradition, this line, this family of cards. So I'm going to full screen this one because I think that the artwork is just going to pop that much more if we do it that way. So, one second here.
Awesome.
So here we are.
Yeah, this is the one that started me off. And getting back to a little bit of my backstory, uh, like I said, when I first got interested in tarot, it was mostly for the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, I was never really, never really a fan of pip decks, and never had any interest in like the Marseille deck, just because the minors didn't do anything for me. But then I did come across this deck. I saw this deck on eBay, and this is the Balbi deck from
Mm-hmm.
I think 1976. The artist is Domenico Balbi, and as you can tell from these two cards, the Fool and the Magician, it definitely bears a strong resemblance to your, familiar Marseille deck.
Mm-hmm.
And you will see that the minors are pips, but not quite like the Marseille pips. But the artwork on these cards just blew my mind. Like I'm such a sucker for this these 70s psychedelic uh, pictures.
Right.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, I don't care if it's a pip deck. I need to get this. And fortunately, it was very affordable for me, and yeah, and had to have it. And as far as like some interesting things about it, one thing you might notice right away on the full card is that it seems to be being associated with Scorpio. And I had never seen the full card associated with Scorpio.
Same. Yeah, exactly.
Um, and so when I first got the deck and I saw that had me scratching my head. Um, I didn't know this at the time, but you'll also see at the bottom, the Fool is associated with the Hebrew letter Shin, I think.
Yep,
Uh,
that's it.
and the Magician is associated with Aleph or Aleph, um, which I don't know, the Kabbalistic side of tarot that well.
Right.
But what I had known was that Aleph was usually associated with the Fool, and Shin, I think, was probably associated with Judgment. But yeah,
Right, right, exactly. Um Off the bat, I just have to say first off, that tiger wants that ass. Is that safe to say? So, just going to point that out.
yeah,
And then, yes, so the Fool generally is associated with Aleph. Here it is Shin. Shin is generally associated with the traditional correspondence with the Aeon card or the Judgment card.
mhm.
And then, yeah, the Magician generally is associated with Beth, which means house. And here it's
Hmm.
Aleph, which means ox. And
Wow,
so that's an intriguing change.
yeah.
Have you looked into maybe what that 300 in the upper left looks like?
Uh,
Because I wonder if that's actually another Kabbalistic sort of
yeah,
correspondence, maybe with Shin itself, because Shin, I
right,
know, does have a relationship with the number three.
right.
You could see the three tips right there. So its numerical correspondence may very well actually be something related to that.
You have it exactly right. It's my understanding that the 300 does correspond to Shin, um, and as you go up the Hebrew alphabet, I think, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think the first 10 letters are like 1 to 10, and then they go by increments of 10, and then increments of hundreds.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll just say that's very interesting here is that the Fool generally is associated with the sun and sunlight, right? And so it's actually, even in the Crowley Thoth deck, the Fool card, the Fool has a solar symbol over its groin. Here, he's associated with nighttime.
Yeah.
And so this almost kind of reminds me a little bit of the Hermit in a way. But he's also holding that staff. He's traveling what appears to be at night. And then here, the Magician has actually been corresponded more so with the sun. And look how brilliant that sun is behind him. Or her.
Yeah. And actually on some of the other decks we'll see that the Magician is specifically assigned the sun. So yeah, that sun is definitely there for a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the other thing that I see that breaks away from tradition is the fact that normally what you're going to see on the Magician's table are objects or tools that represent the 4 elements. And here they're breaking away from that. And so you see, at least on the table itself, 2 discs, 3 or 4 cups, depending on how you look at it, and then 3 swords, and then the Magician is actually holding the wand itself, and then there's another disc on that necklace there. And so this is something that deviates from the norm as well, is just what tools they're choosing to put on that table there.
Yeah.
So very, very interesting.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice. So any further thoughts, I guess, about anything going on here, artwork, correspondence, or otherwise?
Not that I can think of offhand. Mainly I just want to kind of show off the deck a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And even some of these changes in terms of what they mean symbolically.
Yeah.
I can kind of see the case for the Fool traveling in the middle of the night. When you are beginning your journey, the path of the Fool, right? It's a journey that we're all going on. The hero's journey, if you will. And I have a lot of new thoughts about the hero's journey and the path of the Fool and everything else. But you are unaware of the twists and turns that are to come. You're unaware of the peaks and valleys. But the Fool, with his raw energy, he's down for the adventure.
Yeah.
He's up for whatever. And so traveling in the middle of the night, in a way, to me, kind of implies that he's not exactly sure where he'll end up.
Yeah.
But one of the best aspects of the Fool is that, one, you've started the journey and that you're going on the journey. And I think another element of the Fool that I think about, too, is just kind of appreciating the moment. Not being too concerned with what's coming tomorrow or the next day or whatever, but just being present. So to me, that nighttime sort of concept here just reminds me of that a little bit.
Yeah, nice.
So, and then as far as Scorpio is concerned, man, that's really interesting too. I mean, it does remind me of the fact that the traditional correspondence with Scorpio is Mars. And with the Mars glyph, there's that arrow going to the upper right. With Scorpio, you have this arrow going to the upper right as well. And there's just an implied renewal, rebirth sort of thing going on, definitely with Scorpio.
Oh, yeah.
But then with Mars, for sure, there's always an implied movement, that it's always just kind of like moving forward. It reminds me of the symbolism of an arrow, if you will. And so perhaps they were perhaps they were alluding to something along those lines. Excellent.
Nice.
All right. Well, let's see what's going on with the next set of cards here. We've got the Judgment card and the World card.
Yeah. So Judgment, again down at the bottom with the numbers, I believe that sort of continues to follow that Kabbalistic numbering uh, up until the end of the majors.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing with the Judgment card here, again, it looks to me, if you look at the design up at the upper left, it looks like it's trying to be associated with Pisces. That, I mean, to me, that it's those look like two fish.
Mm.
And again,
Interesting.
yeah, and again, you can see the change with the Hebrew letter there.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this same with the world card. Well, the world card keeps the same Hebrew letter, I believe.
I believe correct. Yes. And so, to me, I mean, that glyph on the upper left for the judgment, I guess when I first saw it, for some reason, I assumed Aquarius,
Hmm.
just
Yeah,
two, it's generally, but they are not squiggly,
yeah.
so perhaps you're right. It's implying a connection with Pisces, which the judgment card is the second to last card. And Pisces is the last sign. So there is this ending sort of correspondence,
Hmm.
completion, so maybe it has something to do with that. I'm noticing, speaking of Mars, that there's that Mars glyph too, right above that angel, kind of the to the upper right of that
Oh
angel,
yeah.
a little bit, and so that's an intriguing sort of correspondence as well. Um, and but otherwise, aesthetically, it does do its own thing, but a lot of the traditional symbolism is here. So the cherubim angels, the fixed signs, right, of
Hmm.
astrology being in the corners there for the world card, and some kind of classic symbolism. I do really love, though, actually, I don't know if I see this too often, but notice that in the middle of that wreath there,
Hmm.
um, down below,
Hmm.
there's a bit of water, which
Yeah,
I don't think I see too often,
yeah.
but that is really slick, actually, and very, very interesting. And actually, if you look at the Crowley Thoth version of this card, the universe card,
Hmm.
there's a lot of watery symbolism, actually. And all of the animals in the corners, they're actually spewing water from like their mouths and their
Oh,
noses and stuff. And so this really gets into this idea, and we're not going to completely unpack it here, but that this woman is associated with arc symbolism.
uh-huh.
And so, and the arc in and of itself, I mean, there's literally like an arc, like kind of like an arch, if you will.
Hmm.
But then there's the arc, like a boat. And
Hmm.
the boat symbolism, she very, very much corresponds with. And it'll be something that we'll have to talk about another time. But she heavily corresponds to the northern sky.
Okay.
And I think that I've always thought that this is kind of what's being implied
Okay.
with this woman here. But the watery symbolism makes tons of sense. As above, so below. There's a lot of stuff to be said about the waters above and the waters below. There's a lot of stuff to be said about water having a relationship to light and water having a relationship to spirit as well.
Hmm.
And I kind of consider perhaps spirit might be just another emanation of water
Uh-huh.
itself. So spirit ether might have a closer relationship to water, the element of water, than what we realize.
Yeah.
So, and then I just did a presentation recently, and I've mentioned this before, but the Virgin Mary being called Stella Maris,
Hmm.
the Star of the Sea. So sometimes she's referred to as Our Lady, the Star of the Sea.
Uh-huh.
And she very much relates to water in so many different ways. But it just reminds me of kind of what's going on here. So I love that little detail. That's very cool.
Nice. Yeah, and you said you maybe want to talk about it another time, but that other time might be sooner than you think. I'm not sure if I sent you the right slide, but there was another slide that we may get to later where I was thinking of Stella Maris
Oh,
specific.
nice.
Yeah,
Excellent, excellent. Oh, I'm up to talk about that for sure.
yeah, uh,
Very cool.
yeah.
Also, just have to say, I mean, the numbering convention has changed here a little bit as well because,
Hmm.
I mean, this card, the world card, is the 22nd card.
Right, right. I'm glad you noticed that. I forgot to mention that. Uh, because in this system, they would put the fool between judgment and the world. So
Oh.
even though the fool goes unnumbered, he's technically, I guess, the 21st card between judgment and the world.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, gotcha. Right on.
And that would keep with the system of associating him with Shin.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly right. Okay. So I wonder if that's something that is seen, right? I wonder if we're going to get to another example of this. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but that's really interesting, though. So the Fool would be unnumbered, but it's the 21st card,
Right.
bumping the World card to be the 22nd card,
Right.
which
Right.
you generally do not see under, most traditional, systems.
Right.
Got it. Okay, very interesting. Also, I just love the kind of small detail with the judgment, which is classic, right? Showing a family and other people rising from the tombs, from their crypts or caskets. And here, I just kind of like the fact that they're almost, it's this pink sort of ground, and then the parents are coming out of this squared rectangular hole, but the child is coming out of a very different shaped hole.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That's kind of interesting to me for a few different reasons, but that appears to be very much intentional, obviously. Got it. All right. Let's see what's going on here with the next set of cards. All right. We got some minor cards here.
Yeah. And these are examples of what really kind of blew my mind when I first started to look at this deck. Like I said, wasn't really interested in pip cards, but these were weird because I mean, if you look at the first card on the left, we're looking at the 9 of Swords, but there's a fish,
right?
And then with the 5 and 6 of Cups, we have birds and butterflies. So we definitely have some sort of water imagery going on with the swords and air imagery going on with the cups. And that runs throughout at least runs throughout the suit of swords and cups. And that is clearly intentional because I didn't know why at the time, but Balbi clearly intended the swords to be associated with water and the cups to be associated with air, and that sparked my mind wandering down this rabbit hole that I ended up on with these cards.
Right. So what we see here on the left is the 9 of Swords, but not necessarily the 9 of Swords is associated with air, but associated with water.
Right.
Very, very interesting. Right. So most people, so what would the meaning be? The traditional 9 of Swords meaning or the 9 of Cups meaning, you think?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think the little white book I have with this really made it that clear. I'm trying to remember. I think it's the 9 of Cups meaning.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Got it. Okay. And so this begs the question, and I think I know the answer here, but the discs or pentacles, the earth cards, and then the wand cards, I assume those are just traditional.
Yes.
So the wands are wands, the discs are discs.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, clearly they're trying to emphasize this kind of switch up or whatever. And so when you look at the swords on the left hand side, with the nine of swords or nine of cups, I guess, the sword design itself, you have those two crescent sort of little design
Mhm.
flare handle things, but it
Right.
looks like that white space in the middle is supposed to imply another fish,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
clearly too the background down below, more watery
Right.
sort of symbolism. So that's very intriguing. And then on the right hand side, just the birds and the butterflies, and then in the middle of the five of cups, you can see that little, and it almost looks like a little altarpiece or something, but there's a little owl head on it,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of looks like feathery up top,
Mm-hmm.
I would say
Yep.
as well. Yeah, very, very interesting. So yeah, this is one of the things that you sent me that I was like, oh, I was unaware that this sort of existed out there.
Yeah.
So let's chat about it.
Yeah. Again, I had always just assumed, the associations I had first learned when I, picked up my first Rider Waite deck.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, those were infallible, or
Right.
you couldn't argue with those. Uh, Swords were always air and cups were always water, and that was the truth of it. Um,
Yeah. Right.
this just opened up my world to whole new ideas of you know not just looking at this deck, but you know possibly all my decks. Like definitely look at everything with new eyes. Like you know.
Yeah. 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 No, for sure. Um, it's interesting. One of the things that I always get is that a lot of people confuse the swords for
Mm-hmm.
fire. And they
Mm,
make the argument that actually swords should be associated with fire. And I
yeah,
can see
I've
that
heard that.
case
Yeah,
actually, right?
yeah, I've heard people say, yeah, swords are forged in fire, so it
Exactly.
should be fire.
Exactly. Right. Right. And so, anyway, I think to me the main thing is that I think we're kind of coming from the same place, but I'm not very dogmatic with these
Right.
systems. This is not the hill that I want to die on. I'm not going to defend any correspondence. I have my ideas.
Yeah.
I think of what makes sense, but I would rather be a syncretist where
Mhm.
I'm trying to understand the different systems.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't necessarily resonate or click with me,
Yeah.
I can put it on the back burner. I can put it on a shelf in my mind. And when it becomes appropriate, then I can dive into it deeper or what have you,
Yeah.
But generally, I think it's good and healthy that people come up, I guess, with
Yeah.
their own interpretation of things.
Exactly.
Um, these systems just continue to evolve. And
Yes.
so there are going to be people here that are always going to push forward and uncover a new layer of the Kabbalah or unlayer a new aspect to symbolism or magic or whatever. That's
Yeah.
kind of the deal,
Yeah.
And so this is what you'll find in occult or magical history is continually people just adding their perspective into the mix,
Yeah.
right? And some of it sticks and some of it doesn't.
It's an ongoing conversation. You
Right.
know. Um, you know, it's an ongoing conversation uh, between current tarot enthusiasts, but also I feel like it's a continuing conversation going on with some of these past terrorists, occultists who are long dead.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, it, uh, you know, reading their cards and seeing what they had to say. You know, uh,
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, let's see what's going on here with the next set of cards. Nice.
Yeah. And so here's just more indication that cups were associated with air in this deck, because we can see the Ace of Cups here on the left, and all over that chalice there's the air signs. We can see Libra and Gemini clearly, and if you squint down at the very bottom on the purple base, you can see Aquarius.
Right. Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Right next to that, we've got the Queen of Swords with Cancer emblazoned right across her chest.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. With no mistaking that.
No, definitely not. I mean, this really drives it home. I would say, the fact that they're putting these astrological correspondences and are clearly trying to differentiate, itself from perhaps other decks or other ways of looking at everything.
Yeah, like if you had any doubts about the suit cards, the swords and the minor cards, if you had any doubts about those, these
that clears it up right there.
Yeah, these spell it out for you.
Right. Very, very interesting. I mean, I would love to talk to someone who maybe grew up with these correspondences.
Yeah.
And has really studied them, and not to get into any kind of debate, obviously, but just to see where their head's at with everything, because I just think that would be a really fun conversation. And their insights on the tarot and their insights on the symbolism, I would imagine there's some value there. There has to be.
Yeah. And it really makes me wonder, as we go on, and I can show you, more examples of these cards, specifically being Spanish or originating in Spain. I have to wonder, has this crossed the ocean to, Latin America or the Philippines? Like, would an Argentinian tarot reader, would this be their system?
Right. Very good question. Yeah, I'd be curious to know that as well.
Yeah.
So then, on the right hand side, what you have is the Hermit. Yep. And I can see a couple of differences already. And one is that the Hebrew letter that it's associated with here is Teth. And generally it's Yud or Yod, which means hand, which I've always thought was appropriate because he's holding the lantern with his hand. And the lantern is a lamp also, which is an anagram for palm. And there's a lot of stuff going on there with hand symbolism. It's kind of sneaky. But here it's associated with Teth, which means serpent.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think is interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Generally, Teth is associated with lust or strength. And so, but I do think it's very appropriate here, actually, for a lot of different reasons. Serpentine symbolism, I think it's almost maybe one of the most versatile sort of animals in the animal kingdom when it comes to symbolism and meaning and everything else, because it is very, very feminine, but there's arguably a very masculine component there. And it's very much related to cycles and frequency and, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's kind of appropriate all over the place. But there's a few things that it's making me think of here with the Hermit where it absolutely, aligns and kind of fits nicely.
Yeah. I've actually seen some decks where the Hermit is walking with a serpent. So.
Yes, exactly right. And so again, I've always thought that was appropriate too.
Yeah.
And so, you've probably seen it as well, right? Where the serpent is wrapped around the staff.
Right.
And even in the Crowley Thoth deck, he's looking into a field of wheat and the wheat is separating, and it's revealing an Orphic egg, which is an egg with a serpent wrapped around it. You know, and so there's a number of things to bring up regarding the staff or the scepter and the serpent. I think of the caduceus, you know, that Hermes will be holding often, and you know, Mercury rules Virgo,
Yeah.
and generally Virgo is associated with this card as well.
Yeah.
Here you see that it's associated on a planetary level with Neptune, you know, which I think is very interesting.
Yes.
So off the top of my head, you know, there's a couple of things I'm kind of thinking of here, but does that conjure up anything for you?
For me, mostly just more water associations, but I don't know. What were you thinking?
Well, you know, as it relates to water, the traditional astrological correspondence is Virgo, and literally within the Virgo glyph, you have that little fish.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right? And Virgo is opposite Pisces as well. So the Piscean sort of thing definitely is relevant whenever you're talking about Virgo. I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so it makes me think of that. And then also, too, to me, what it kind of says a little bit, just with straight water symbolism, is this idea that, you know, the hermit's looking for his other half. He's looking for, I believe, he's seeking the divine feminine. So water is an aspect of that. Water is an emanation or a pure expression of that.
Yeah.
And so to me, it potentially is alluding to this idea of the fact that the hermit, and it's even interesting too, hermit, you know, her right there, you know, it might be implying something along those lines. Yeah. So just, I don't know, just off the top of my head, a couple of things kind of come to mind. And that's that. But yeah, I do love this artwork, dude. I think it's really cool.
Any thoughts about the lamp looking like an eye?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely noticed that. I'm like, is it an eye? It kind of looks a little bit like a yoni, you know, but all of these symbols, the eye, the yoni, the lamp, you know, they might be closer, you know, than what people kind of realize. I tend to see similarities over differences, you know, a lot of the time. And that's not necessarily for everyone. But yeah, I mean, the eye, I mean, enlightenment, right? The third eye. So I think obviously the eye, the single eye, I really personally always see the correspondence with the I and the letter I, and then the fact that we refer to self as I as well, right? And so everything about the hermit implies going inward, going within. I've said this a bunch of different times, but the number 9 itself mathematically essentially implies the same thing. So you double 9 and it's 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. You triple 9, it's 27. 2 plus 7 is 9. Quadruple it, you know, so on down the line, no matter how many times you multiply 9, the digits will reduce and add up to 9. And then same thing if you half 9. So half of 9 is 4.5. 4 plus 5 is 9. Half of that is 2.25. 2 plus 2 plus 5 is 9. And so 9 always returns back to itself.
Nice.
You know, and so to me, the eye is very much a symbol of the sacred center. It's been said that the lowercase I, this is according to the Bach Saga for people who are interested in that kind of stuff. But in the Bach Saga, it says that the lowercase I is the line is the world axis, and the dot on top is Polaris, the pole star. And some people have said in my chat when I've done presentations talking about some of this stuff that perhaps Polaris is Polaris. And isn't it interesting that we have this eye symbol and then right below we have this pole?
Yeah.
You know, his staff.
Yeah.
So I'm always on the lookout for are these creators, are they aware of the polar tradition, the northern tradition? Is that part of their wheelhouse?
Hmm.
Is it not? I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
see it everywhere
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
I kind of can't turn it off. But those are a few of the things that I think
Yeah.
about regarding the eye. And I do think too that our third eye, there's a correspondence with Polaris,
Yeah.
and when I see what some people might refer to as Illuminati symbolism,
Yeah.
the eye of Providence, the eye inside the pyramid or the
Yeah.
triangle, I made a whole presentation about it. But I do think that that eye is referring to the eye in the sky, which I do relate to the pole star,
Hmm.
Polaris, for so many different reasons. So if people are interested in that, they can check out that presentation.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
Nice. Speaking of, so it appears he's traveling at night,
Yeah.
and that seems to be a pretty prominent star uh, to the
Right.
left of the tree. I mean, it's
Sure.
not just a little star. I mean, it's uh,
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, is that another nod to
exactly.
perhaps Polaris?
Yeah.
And also too, again, this card corresponds with Virgo, the Virgin.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I look at the Hermit is that he's the child of the Virgin.
Okay.
In many ways, he's like Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that when you look at Christ in certain depictions, it really, I see a direct correspondence between Christ being the good shepherd, leading his flock,
Hmm.
and the hermit. So I think that the hermit is symbolically kind of like an advanced aged Christ, a
Yeah.
shepherd herder. And some of the depictions of the hermit, it looks very, very obvious that he may have been a shepherd herder in his past life. Hence
Okay.
the staff,
Interesting.
and things like
Yeah.
that. So he
Ah,
is born of a virgin, I would say,
yeah.
symbolically.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
cool.
Nice. Well, let's proceed here. And we've got a new deck to
A
look
new
at.
deck. Yeah. So when I started trying to find out what I could about Balbi and his deck and why he was switching up the swords and cups, um, I don't know how I came across it, but I ended up hearing about this occultist named Ouds Picard, and I may be mispronouncing that. Eudespicard, who was actually French, um, but he had created a deck in 1909, and his majors were mostly reminiscent of the Marseille deck. But in his minors, he made the point of changing up the swords and the cups,
Mm.
and uh, his deck was the inspiration for Balbi. And so here we have a couple examples. The interesting thing about his deck, uh, his deck was printed in association with a book that he had written, and unfortunately, I can't remember the exact title of his book, particularly since it was French. Um, but there was a limited printing of his deck of, I think it was just 50 cards, and then after that, the original printing plates were lost until 2012.
Hmm.
And so there were no other printings of his deck until the 21st century. So people like Balbi and some other deck creators will see all they had to go on was his writing and descriptions of the cards. But fortunately, like I said, the original plates were found in 2012, and another limited run was printed then, and then not too long ago. I think it was 2020. Um, this particular printing came out, and this was
Mm,
printed by Christine Payne Towler, who you know as the creator of the Holy Light Tarot,
yeah. Yeah,
um,
Terror of the Holy Light.
Tarot of the Holy Light. Uh, and she printed this through the same publisher that printed that deck, Noria Brownfield.
Got it. Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah,
That's
so
interesting.
yeah, so now we are lucky to have another Picard deck based on his original artwork um, from in just the past couple of years, which was great timing for me because that was about when I was trying to figure out what was going on with the Balbi deck. So
I see. Yeah, that's interesting. For people who are unaware, the Tarot of the Holy Light, I've talked about, whenever I do tarot presentations, essentially, and get into one deck, and her deck is very alchemical. She likes to remix and reuse older artwork to great effect, I might add.
mm-hmm.
And some of the symbolism is still very much over my head,
Yeah,
actually.
there's a lot to unpack in those cards.
100%. But there's a lot going for it, though, and there's so much to decode and look at and consider and all these things. And I trust that, I kind of like, she's one of these people. I've never met her or anything like that, but I trust that if she went out of her way to help get this deck published, then there must be secrets here that
Yeah,
are worth diving into, right?
yeah.
And so, yeah, more of kind of what you were explaining earlier regarding the elemental switch here. It's very interesting. You generally never see a sword, piercing the ocean like that, let alone with a lobster down below, which is one of the substitute symbols for Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And Cancer has a whole long tradition. I've made a video about it, being corresponded with different animals, generally shelled animals, creatures with exoskeletons, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not uncommon to look at older sky maps, illustrated sky maps, and see a lobster instead of a crab for Cancer. So absolutely, to me, a reference to Cancer in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lunar symbolism, clearly Cancer generally corresponds with the moon, and so you got those two crescents here. So I assume this would be the Ace of Swords, or I guess the
Absolutely.
Ace of Cups, symbolically the meaning behind it.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
Got it. Got it. Reminds me very much of the moon card, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always see that crab or
Yeah.
the lobster down below in the water, and he's usually kind of like, his pinchers are kind of it's almost like to me it's almost like there's this embrace or something whenever I see the moon card, and those pinchers
Mm.
sometimes they're kind of just put out there,
Mm-hmm.
almost like it's really revering the moon, or almost like it's about to
Yeah.
transcend or
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
through some sort of gateway or whatever. And generally on the moon card you have the two towers and things like that. um, and then kind of in the same vein over here on the right hand side, assuming this is the Three of Cups.
Yep.
And so the Three of Cups, right? But there's all this air symbolism. And
Mm-hmm.
so you see what looks to me like Gemini on one cup, and then even in the corners. And then on the bottom cup, you have the scales of Libra,
Yep.
which
And
would
it's
mean that. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say on the third cup, it's kind of hard to see in the line work, but the Aquarius is on the third cup.
Right, right. Yeah, that would make sense. I didn't really see that. I just noticed the flower right there,
Yeah.
but there it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can see the Aquarius symbol. So air symbolism, the air signs on these cups. And then you have that butterfly right there as well. And then right in the middle, you have, to me, what looks like a symbolic egg.
Mm-hmm.
And this just reminds me of the fact that there are people who do think that the first element may have been air. I think
Mm.
there's kind of an interesting conversation there. If there
Huh.
was a first element, if they all came around the same time or
Yeah.
whatever. but I've heard that be said multiple times throughout the years that
Yeah.
air has a quality that relates it to spirit, and it may have been the first out
Yeah.
of the four base elements.
Interesting. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. So, as you were saying, this was the deck that influenced the previous deck that we were looking at.
Right. Right.
Gotcha, gotcha. And what a long time, man, for these plates to be missing and then
Yeah.
found again. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, and it's amazing. 50 years. It was roughly 50 years between this deck and the Balbi deck, and no real surviving decks of this, around for Balbi. So, you know, I really have to. I really have to tip my hat to Picard that he was able to have such longevity without, mass circulation of his deck, like to have that kind of an impact on tarot creators 50 years later. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of curious. Are you aware if, generally when you see an ace card, the sword is going to be pointed upright, the wand is pointed upright, the cup is pointed upright.
Yeah.
Do you know if the other ace cards are the elements, the tools that represent the elements, are they pointed down generally, or is this the only instance? I know you have a ton of decks too, so if you don't remember off the top of your head, it's all good.
I think this may be the only one. I mean, definitely I know the Ace of Cups is always upright, or almost always upright in most cases for these decks. And pretty sure the Ace of Wands, it's usually shown emblazoned, and I believe it all usually has an orb at the top, and that is usually upright.
Right, gotcha. Just because, the symbolic difference between a sword pointed upright and a sword pointing downward, it's a big difference. And then also, I would say too, another thing is that when the tip of the spear or the tip of the blade or the sword, when it's hidden, it kind of neutralizes it a little bit. And so here it's hidden in two different ways. It's hidden within the water. So, and then it's also hidden behind the lobster, and then it's also pointed downward. So there is this neutralizing sort of symbolism that I get, at least from the card on the left-hand side. You know, when it's pointed up, to me, it implies clarity and swiftness and focus and, kind of like achievement in a way, and this balance and everything. But when it's pointed downward, I just get a different vibe from it. So that's very, very intriguing. That's why I asked about the other aces.
Yeah.
So just thought I would throw that out there. And I'm sure, I'm not checking the chat, by the way, but I'm sure there's some excellent comments coming through with people decoding some of these cards and everything else.
Oh, I hope so.
Right on. Awesome. Let's see what's going on here with the next slide.
I'm counting on the chat when I watch it back later. I'm counting on the chat to help me out and to learn about what I've been looking at.
Oh yeah, dude. There's nothing like having dozens of people, comment on it and throwing in their 2 cents and stuff like that. So, and I know for a fact too, I don't know who's exactly here right now, but there are some really, really sharp decoders that tend to watch my stuff.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah. So we have here the Ace of Cups, right, from both decks. And what actually, we already saw this guy on the right-hand side, right?
Yep. And so, so this was just an example of Picard also having the air glyphs on his Ace of Cups. Again, they get a little lost in the line work, but down at the base, you can see in descending order, you can see Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius.
Excellent. Right. Gotcha. Well, clear influence right there, as you're pointing out.
Yeah.
And then you also see these two birds, within the kind of the bowl of the cup, I guess, the vessel portion of the cup. And then you see that butterfly as well. Very, very interesting. And then I just have to say, too, one sort of thread of research that I've been pulling at as of late is this idea that actually the dove, which you generally see delivering that wafer, this is kind of a, I believe it's like kind of the main OTO symbology is a dove with a wafer, if I'm not mistaken, and then it's kind of in this yoni sort of shape. That dove is absolutely symbolic. I'm pretty convinced now. This dove is absolutely symbolic of this great mother, this primordial mother, the dark feminine mother, who has a lot of corresponding symbolism with the North.
Yeah.
And so this relates the dove to Typhonian symbolism. And I was just talking to a guy on a live stream a couple weeks ago, and he was actually part of the OTO, and he confirmed some of that information. So that dove right there, has a relationship with the Virgin Mary, with Nuit, with Typhon, with Tiamat, and several other sort of, great mother archetypes, I guess.
Yeah.
So just wanted to point that out, because generally the symbolism is that she gave birth to a male counterpart without a partner. And so she gave birth to a son. And so here you could see the dove is delivering symbolically what looks like a little son.
Yeah. Nice.
So there's a feminine masculine sort of element going on here. The feminine being the bird, and then the masculine actually in this case being the sun, which obviously it's interesting, SUNSON.
Yeah.
Right? So, because we've seen this a couple times now, I wanted to bring that up. But very cool, man. Very interesting to kind of get this little history here.
And yeah, another example of where Balbi was clearly drawing his influence from Picard on the left.
Oh man, yeah, exactly. Whoa, interesting. So what do you make of what turned into, or what looks more like a tail on the right-hand side, but it almost kind of looks like some sort of tool or like half a wheel or something?
It's like a half a wheel or a horn, like a powder horn. I have no idea.
Gotcha. Right.
Clearly the Picard one definitely looks like half of a wheel. I have no idea what kind of I wonder if it's supposed to be a sextant.
That crossed my mind.
Yeah. I don't know.
The one on the left looks like it could potentially be related to something along those lines, but the one on the right looks like it's morphing it into like some sort of demonic tail.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Right. So you got more of the water symbolism on the left-hand side, right, which is corresponding with the swords right now in this tradition.
Yep.
And they both have a checkerboard floor as well.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
Got it. Yeah, very interesting.
I don't know what Picard's original intent was with the checkerboard floor, but particularly, one floating out in the water. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are already thinking it, but the Freemasonic tradition.
Yeah.
The checkerboard floor, black and white, the two pillars, Boaz, Jacquin, feminine, masculine, just the polarity or duality of things.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then once again, the swords are pointed downward too. And so this would be the prince, or the page rather.
Hey, right. Yep.
Right. Well, that makes sense too, because the pages, they're so new, I guess, to their journey. I look at page symbolism or prince symbolism very much kind of like fool symbolism. They're starting their journey. Eventually, they're going to turn into knights. Or, the symbolism is that it evolves with experience into the knight, and then the queen has more experience than the knight, and then
Yeah.
the king has more experience than the queen, and so you're
Yeah.
going from a very raw sort of new thing to a more advanced kind of stage. So the
Yeah.
fact that the knives or the swords are pointed downward,
Hmm.
I do think makes a bit of sense.
Yeah. And I see as he's starting out on his journey, he's sort of with the tip of his sword, he's like marking out sort of his territory. Particularly, as he's marking it out on a grid, this is going to be my little space.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wonder if this thing is like a vessel of
Oh,
some
yeah.
kind,
Yeah, yeah.
and that it just from I don't know. That's really intriguing. So perhaps someone in the chat when we check later has the answer for us.
Yeah. Yeah, my
Got it.
first thought was at least with the Balbi deck on the right, my first thought was like a powder horn for like a musket or something. But
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think you actually might be right with that. Yeah, that makes sense. With no weapon. I
yeah,
mean, he has the sword, but he
he's
doesn't
got
have
the
the
sword.
musket.
Yeah, where's his musket?
Right, right. Interesting. And are you aware of other? Are there other court cards that have this checkerboard floor by chance, or is this just kind of a one-off thing for these guys?
I'm trying to remember if the other sword cards have it, and offhand, I can't remember. I feel like the king does, but I'd have to grab the deck to be certain.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Alrighty. So let's see what's going on here.
So these are just some examples of Picard's major cards. Again, we have the Fool and the Magician. Again, we can see Picard's influence on Balbi with associating the Fool with Scorpio and the Magician
Mm-hmm.
with the Sun.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. And then obviously very much related to the Marseille way of
Right.
doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. Got it. Okay. Otherwise, fairly standard stuff, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. I didn't have a lot to say about that, but mostly I just wanted to show Picard's influence when it came to the astrological associations as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I would say there probably is something going on with those little circles on the table over there
Yeah,
in the lower left-hand corner.
yeah.
So I would imagine. I mean, to me, it just looks a little too orderly and specific to be
Uh-huh.
random, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Any
gotcha.
thoughts
Okay.
on what they might be?
I'm not really sure. Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't really say. I do know that there is a hole, and I mean, I don't know if that's what it would be on the right, but I mean, you see that knife,
Hmm.
right? And then you see, it almost looks like there might be other knives or
Hmm.
something along those lines on the
Yeah.
right. And then it looks like there might be some sort of pouch or container or something along those lines.
Hmm.
But there's a tarot content creator. His name is Tora.tarot, I believe, or Tarot.Tora.
Uh-huh.
And he's on Instagram and elsewhere. And he's kind of, over time, he's uncovered a lot of information that suggests that a lot of older kind of Marseille inspired magician cards,
Uh-huh.
that the wand was actually very, very phallic and that
Uh-huh.
it looked essentially just like a penis, really.
Uh-huh.
And that the tools he's arguing on the table are actually circumcision tools, esoteric Jewish circumcision tools, which that's a whole little rabbit hole that you can kind of go down with a lot of different things. But he's made the case that the in some of these older decks that the hat is actually implying circumcision too, and that the brim of the hat, I guess, is symbolic of foreskin. And so he sees the magician card as being, especially these older cards,
Uh-huh.
being very much related to, a Kabbalistic tradition, but
Yeah.
also a Jewish tradition of circumcision. And so when I see those extra tools on the right hand side there and that little pouch,
Uh-huh.
perhaps it's some sort of remnant of that, but I have no idea. But just thought I would throw that out there. I don't know if I've actually ever covered that on the channel, but I don't think he's wrong. Actually,
Yeah.
I think he's kind of on the money with the decks that he's put out there. I think
Yeah.
he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Nice.
So there's all of that. Gotcha. Well, let's move on to the next set here. Got it. Okay. So the Hermit card and then the Hanged Man.
Yep. And again, just wanted to highlight the different astrological associations. In this case, the Hermit being associated with Neptune and the Hangman being associated with Uranus.
Right. Gotcha. Admittedly, I've been so focused on the 7 traditional planets that the outer planets, get away from me a little bit.
Yeah.
In terms of research.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are people out there that would have a lot of excellent things to say regarding this version of the correspondence, but I'm kind of limited in that regard.
Yeah. And again, this deck was created in 1909, and I think Pluto was discovered like around 1930. So had Picard lived a little longer, or if Pluto had been discovered a little earlier, I wonder if he would have somehow fit Pluto into his deck.
Right. There's something very interesting going on here on the right-hand side with the Hanged Man that I would like to point out.
Okay.
And it has to do with the number of branches.
Okay.
So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which that's what I was assuming. That's what I was hoping to see, actually. And so it's the 12th card. And off the top of your head, does the Rider Waite do this, or any other like common decks? These severed branches that are kind of obvious.
I'm pretty sure I've seen other decks with the severed branches. I don't know if they've been 12.
Right.
I've never counted them, and I don't. Trying to picture the Rider Waite now, but I don't think it does.
Yeah, I don't think it does either. Actually, I could be wrong on that, but so the severed branches, very, very interesting. The fact that there's 12, the fact that this is the 12th card of the major arcana. The number 12, according to my research over the years, it's very much a solar number. And so, which is why we have the 12 numbers on a clock. We have a 24-hour day, the 12 signs of the zodiac, which is a solar-based system. It's the path of the sun. It's the ecliptic. And so I've read from a couple of different sources that say that the world tree used to have fewer and fewer branches symbolically the further back you go. And so at one point, symbolically, the world tree had 7 branches because there was this huge correspondence with the northern sky. And I've done a lot of, material on that. I've put out presentations and things like that about the number 7 and how it relates to the northern sky, mainly through Ursa Major and Minor, each having 7 stars and all of that. And my opinion about that is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger the more I read about all this stuff. And so at one point, symbolically, the world tree had 7 branches indicating a northern correspondence. And at some point, when the solar tradition kind of took over, if you want to put it that way, and the polar tradition fell out of favor, the northern tradition fell out of favor, symbolically, the world tree got 12 branches because it's a solar-based number.
Yeah.
And so when you start thinking about the number 12 being a solar number, it makes so much sense. And so I just thought I would point that out. And, it's not uncommon to see the Hanged Man with kind of a halo sort of solar flare behind his head as well.
Yeah.
And actually you kind of see it here with his hair a little bit.
Yeah.
So implying sort of enlightenment. And that's the thing behind this card is to me it relates very much to a line of mythology
Uh-huh.
regarding dying gods, or gods that are put into this predicament that
Right.
really forces some sort of change or
Right.
forces some sort of transmutation, just like Christ
Right.
being nailed to the cross.
Right.
And there's certain decks that have really emphasized that symbolism with this card,
Yeah.
right? And then Christ is quote unquote the Son of God. The Son, Sunson.
Right.
So anyway, so whenever I see this card, I think of the crucifixion of Christ as well, and generally this card corresponds with Pisces as well,
Mm-hmm.
and Christ was associated with fish symbolism, like in several different instances.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's what I really wanted to point out, though, the
Cool.
12 branches and the solar symbolism that kind of gets connected to
Yeah.
it.
Nice.
All right, so moving on.
Oh, and then by comparison, there's Balbi's, which
Right.
now let's look at the branches. I'm curious.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It depends on how you look at it, yeah.
Did he flub it?
Because I see, aside from the ones above that are actually holding the crossbar or whatever,
Yeah.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah. Nice.
Oh yeah, yeah, nice.
And so, obviously, as you're mentioning, the influence is very, very clear here. And so he's associating it, though. That looks like an Aries glyph up top, right?
Yeah, that's why I've tried to figure that out, because obviously the Hermit does have Neptune, but yeah, trying to figure out what that thing at the top is supposed to be, if that's supposed to be Aries or if there's some sort of Uranus glyph I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, I think it's Aries, which makes sense. What I've noticed actually is that some of the correspondence switches, it's just the next sign over. And so Pisces leads to Aries.
Right.
Right. And so Pisces is the last sign of the astrological year. Aries is the first sign. So I'm inclined to think it's definitely Aries.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then the Hebrew letter, that looks like Lamed,
Yes.
I believe, which means ox goad, which generally corresponds with the Justice card. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Aries connects to once again, Jesus, he's associated with every single sign, basically.
Yeah.
And he's been called many, many different things. But a lot of important Christ symbolism and dates associated with him occur during Aries season. And Aries season is when he gets crucified.
Yeah.
So that makes actually a lot of sense. And then the ox goad, that's a tool for people with cattle, to basically direct cattle in a certain direction and everything else. So anyway, that's a nice correspondence switch, actually, for a few different reasons.
Interesting.
So I do like that. Yeah, totally. Nice. All right, let's move forward here. All right, so we got a different deck.
Yes. So this is a much more modern deck. This is much more contemporary than either Picard's 1909 or Balbi's 1976. This is the Crystal Tarot. And let me get the name of the artist for you.
Sure.
Don't forget that. Elisabetta Trevisan. And I believe she's Italian. And this came out, I think, in 2004. So it's definitely a much more recent deck. And you'll see on this Ace of Cups here, you'll see some familiar imagery. Obviously, the butterfly is familiar. But if you look closely at the base of, or the lip of the cup, just below the castle or the buildings there, going across the lip, you can see the signs for Aquarius, Gemini, and Libra. So So
Yeah,
again,
there they are.
we see another deck with uh, air associations being made with the suit of cups.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Very clear.
Yeah,
Man, aesthetically, what a winner.
yeah,
This is a really great Ace of Cups.
yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah, and then
yeah.
obviously the birds, right, and all that kind of stuff embedded everywhere. And I
Hmm.
love actually the just the detail of instead of having this castle or fortress or whatever, it's like a whole little town,
Hmm.
in the Grail part of the cup there.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Very cool. I love it, dude. Actually, this is one of the decks that, as you've been sending me some of the artwork for it, I'm like, man, I might have to get this one.
Yeah. It's
It's really
it's
cool.
it's beautiful.
Awesome.
And here's a side by side between her deck on the right and good old Picard's deck on the left.
Mm.
The Four of Cups, and again, you can see where she's drawn her influence. She may not have the the Gemini glyph on her card, but she's got that egg with the eagle or whatever kind of bird that's supposed to be. I'm assuming an eagle.
Mm.
Um, you know, they're in the center, so it's clear, where her, who her influences have been.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's really cool, man. I love her stuff. This is
Yeah.
a fantastic deck. The eagle is interesting because when you see it in the sort of traditional setup where they're showing the fixed signs,
Hmm.
you see an eagle in the corner,
Hmm.
and that's symbolic of Scorpio.
Hmm.
But there is a very, very, very strong correspondence with the eagle and Aquarius as well,
Mm.
which is an air sign.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, as an example, an Aquarian myth, Ganymede. I always say it wrong. I don't know,
Hmm.
but he is the cupbearer, and that's
Hmm.
what Aquarius is. And so he's a cupbearer, and he gets basically, Zeus takes him to be his kind of love slave, Zeus assumes the form of an eagle in order
Mm.
to make this happen, and he very much corresponds with Aquarius. So
Yeah.
there's a whole line of mythology. There's actually several things kind of going on here with the eagle, and how it could relate to Aquarius, an air sign. So just thought I would point that out. Very interesting too. There's deliberate use of certain plants here, right? It looks like cherries down below, wheat on the left hand side and right
Hmm.
hand side. It looks
Yep.
like, and then maybe peaches up top.
Mm.
No, not peaches. Pears.
Hmm. Nice.
Yeah, very cool, man. All right, this is a stunner too, man.
Yep.
Jeez.
And this is her version of the page.
Whoa.
So
Excellent.
yeah,
Whoa.
yeah,
What a cool take.
yeah, yeah. And obviously, we can see the influence again of having the page on this floating checkerboard with his sword pointed down. But yeah, that's the like you said, the take itself is just amazing.
Oh, this is incredible. I
Yeah.
love it. And then I love the cape, blending
Mhm.
in with the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And the color palette.
Like it's just running into it. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Okay, gotcha. Nice.
Yeah. That's an amazing deck.
Awesome. So here we are with a new deck.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will probably know this guy. This is Salvador Dali's deck. And it has a lot of connections, a lot of the similarities that we've seen with the Picard and Balbi and the Crystal Tarot. but it has its own differences as well. And I probably don't need to introduce Salvador Dali to the audience, but this was a deck that he started work on, I think, in the early 70s. Originally, it was commissioned, I believe, to be the prop deck for the James Bond film Live and Let Die. But that project never came to fruition. But even though his deal with the studio fell through, he continued to work on this deck, and I believe it was a passion project of his. And here, yeah, and here's his magician card, and once again we can see Aleph being associated with it, as well as the sun down at the bottom right there.
Gotcha. Right. Okay. Very cool, man. You know, I told you in private, but I've always held off buying this deck because I didn't know if Dali had any real sort of hand in its creation, or if part of me wondered if they just took a bunch of Dali art and then just turned it into a tarot deck, which I wouldn't have blamed them for doing or whatever.
Right.
But that's been done before with other artists. Giger, I'm pretty sure that's what they did with his stuff too. And I'm just like, you know, some of these cards are cool, and I do see the association, but it kind of feels more like they're shoehorning things together, and it feels like a money grab, you know?
Yeah, I get your hesitation for that, but this was his creation for a tarot deck.
Nice. Well, it's definitely on my radar now. And as far as the symbolism is concerned with the magician here, I mean, him being the magician makes sense to me. The fact that his stance, his posture, you know, it's very, he's not, obviously, generally you're going to see the magician with one hand up and one hand down. One hand is going to have the wand. And here he's, you know, holding his elbows in a way, or his arms are kind of just like tucked in a little bit.
Seems a little defensive to me.
Yeah, totally, right? He looks like he's seen something that kind of frightened him or whatever, which is kind of his look too, you know? But to me, I just get this phallic sort of thing, you know, and I get this sort of phallic, almost pole-like sort of thing, and he's in the middle of this setup, which, dang, there's a name for it, but basically there's a it's like a dome-like structure, right? And so he's in the middle of this dome, if you will, which if you're in the middle of a dome, this corresponds very much with the North Pole and the world axis. So the pole from the North Pole to the pole star. So the top of the dome would be where the pole star would be. And so this is very mercurial in a lot of different ways. Him kind of being right there in the middle, corresponding to me, in my eyes, with the world axis, also corresponding with the number one being a symbol of the world axis. And the world axis is how Mercury travels from realm to realm. And so this card generally is corresponding with Mercury itself. And then even with the sun glyph, I would say arguably that the sun glyph used to be not so much a solar symbol, but a polar symbol. And that dot right there in the middle might be emblematic or symbolic of that world axis as well. Is kind of how I see it. So very, very interesting.
Go ahead. As far as the tools on his table, any thoughts to the fact that, you know, he included his famous melting clock?
Right. So what do I see here, actually? Maybe you can help me understand the tools. Is that a drink that's close to him?
Yeah, that's my guess. It's, you know, it looks like a little shot of whiskey or something.
Right. Is that food on the left-hand side and right-hand side? Like almost like a broken bread?
I cannot tell, but that
might be a loaf of bread or a roll or something.
Yeah, that is, I think, a good possibility. Yep.
And then
and
that
a
long
scroll of
item there.
yeah.
Is that like
To me,
salami or something that's like wrapped or like what is that?
yeah, I don't know. To me, it looks like a scroll, like a rolled up scroll of some
Ah,
sort. But
got it, got it. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the breaking bread thing is very intriguing. The fact that he included his clock, that's interesting. Okay, so let's just say that there are four main things here.
hmm
It looks like the bread. To me, that looks like bread, and it's broken, right?
right,
And then there's the shot of whiskey,
yeah,
and then there's the clock. So I'm just trying to find the elemental
yeah,
correspondence. To me, the bread would be more than likely earth, I would
right,
say.
yeah. That makes the most sense, I think.
And then arguably, well, generally the wands are fire.
hmm
So whatever that is,
hmm
symbolic of fire.
hmm
And then the drink, water,
hmm
more than likely, but kind of
Yeah,
fire water, it
yeah,
looks
yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah,
And so that means that time is
uh
corresponding with air.
yeah. Interesting.
Nice, nice. Yeah. So I think that's probably it. So the bread, earth, whatever that elongated thing is, fire, and then his drink, water, and then his clock, symbolic of air. Nice. Very cool, man. I like this one. There's
Yeah,
it definitely has a presence to it.
yeah,
I'll say. And I'll say all of the Dolly stuff does.
yeah.
So moving on to the next one. There we go. The
Yep,
Hangman once
yep,
again.
yep. And once again, we see the astrological association with Uranus and the Hebrew letter Lamed, as you pointed out. So clearly, he was following the same sort of line of thinking that Picard had followed. That Picard
Right.
and then later Balbi. Uh, and I think he was, you know, working on this deck contemporaneously as you know as Balbi. And so
Mm.
I don't know if he had ever seen the Balbi deck before he finished this deck. Um, but I imagine he must have been familiar with Picard to
Mm.
to have some of these influences uh,
Right.
or
Right.
these associations.
Got it. Yeah. I'm noticing too his signature there's a G.
Mm,
So G Dolly. And the G is rather large
yeah,
as well. So I wonder what's up with that. And
yeah,
I'm just
mm,
kind of like fast forwarding to other Dolly cards, and I
yeah,
don't see that anywhere else
yeah,
actually.
yeah. I
So
never.
that's intriguing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the blue palette, implying water,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, and then also he's really emphasizing, I guess, the point where the hanged man is hanging from.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of dripping,
Yeah.
right, almost onto him, sort of thing. Which actually, it does look like it's dripping onto his legs
Yeah.
as well, right? And then it looks like he he has this guy dressed up almost like I don't know, like Shakespeare or something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting and intriguing. It actually, the more I look at it, it does kind of, it almost feels a little bit underwater. Um,
Mm,
but some of his stuff kind of tends to look like that too.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, very, very, very interesting. I think I'm gonna pick this one up.
Okay. Cool.
I do like it.
Yeah.
Nice. But definitely, a break from tradition, which isn't really a surprise in certain ways. It's just that the figure is much smaller. It's not as in your face. He definitely got more detailed, with just how he chooses to paint everything and bring
Mm-hmm.
everything together. The figure isn't even necessarily right in the middle, which
Yeah.
generally you're going to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
it like right in the middle. The cross leg too. Usually, I think the cross leg is it usually in front of the other leg that he's hanging from, or behind. I feel
Yeah.
like
I think
maybe
you're right. Yeah.
behind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, some traditional stuff here overall, but also definitely doing his own unique thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So here we have his version of the Hermit card.
Yep, and I've got a couple things to say about this guy. First of all, the thing that strikes me as interesting is the Astrological Association uh, with the glyph. That glyph looks incomplete, whatever it's supposed to be. I assume it's supposed to be Neptune, but at the same time, it could also be supposed to be Pluto. And I have to wonder, you know.
I think it might be a variation on Uranus,
Interesting.
perhaps. So, because I'm looking at a couple of sheets that I have here, and yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. I think
Oh, interesting.
maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, so Picard obviously hadn't known about Pluto, uh, when he was doing his deck in 1909. And I just wondered if maybe this was Dali's slight nod to you know to the tarot readers, saying, hey, this could be Neptune, it could be Pluto. It's up to
Mm.
you. You make the call.
Right.
But interesting, yeah.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah, you're exactly. Yeah, and another glyph altogether. I didn't think
Right.
yeah.
Interesting card. Yeah, I mean, it breaks from tradition in the way that the Hermit really, generally, obviously, you usually see him from a sideways perspective. Not so much here.
Yeah.
Right. Generally, the lantern is brought up higher.
And yeah, and specifically this lantern. This I wanted to give a shout out to Juan Ayala of the One on One podcast.
Hell yeah.
Supposedly, that form within his lantern is supposed to be a homunculus.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So the hermit here is lighting his way with his homunculus.
Is it supposed to be an upside down homunculus?
Yes.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, when you zoom into it, it looks like it's supposed to be an upside down little figure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, to me, when I first saw it, when I got the deck, my first thought was that, it was a fetus. But according to the book that comes with the deck, it's supposed to be a homunculus.
Well, that makes perfect sense because when you look at, say, the Crowley version of the Hermit card, there's a little sperm cell, and the sperm cell has a little man within it, and it's long been said that little man is also a homunculus.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the homunculus symbolism, I think, makes perfect sense to be associated with the Hermit card.
Yeah.
For sure. Nice. And then also, I'm really intrigued, and I think this is a very interesting sort of angle here with the black clouds down below. And the fact that he's seemingly kind of emanating from these black clouds, and also his wand or staff is also penetrating those black clouds. So
it's like he's stirring it up.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah, right. I mean, that makes it more alchemical in nature, and just reminds me of the mysteries, reminds me of, putrefaction kind of, and, just things that, the unknown, if you will. So, and obviously, generally, the hermit is traveling at night. And so it kind of fits in with that as well. And then there's this really nice little sort of jeweled halo sort of thing, too, behind his head.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And then not quite sure what to make of that background there, but that's obviously intentional.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool. And, the monk sort of angle as well, right, is on display here for sure. All right. And here is the Empress.
Yeah. Can't remember why took out the Empress, but I think it might have something to do with the zodiacal glyph or the astrological glyph at the bottom right of the card.
Mm.
I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, but for some reason I was thinking it was supposed to represent Earth, not the element Earth, but the planet Earth.
Mm.
Because I feel like I've seen that and maybe I've seen that in one of these other decks I've got. I feel like I've seen the Empress associated with Earth somewhere.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, 100% for sure. Mother Earth,
Yeah.
sort of thing. So I look at the Empress as generally being more of a terrestrial sort of mother.
Right.
Whereas the High Priestess, I think that there's a little bit more of a transcendental quality to her. And so to me, the Empress and the Emperor are kind of like the matriarchal figure and the patriarchal figure right next to each other. The third card and the fourth card. And so, yeah, no, her association with Earth absolutely is there. The association that she generally has with Venus as well. You know, Venus corresponds with Taurus, right? Which is a fixed Earth sign. You know, it's the middle sign in spring. And so I could see the case that that's kind of what they were going for. There is a tradition, actually, and perhaps it's in line with this. And, dude, if I'm not mistaken, it's actually a Spanish tradition.
Okay.
Where instead of having the air, earth, water, fire be triangular glyphs, they're actually circular glyphs.
Ah.
So I wonder if this is kind of a different take on that.
Yeah.
And also, I'd be kind of curious to know as well if there are other circular glyphs, I guess, anywhere else in the major arcana.
Yeah. Ah.
So, yeah, you might be onto
I'll
something.
double check. Yeah.
And then also, I just have to point out, she has a wand with a fleur-de-lis on the end of it.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I just did a presentation with Juan and Old World Florida about the fleur-de-lis, so people should check that out if they haven't seen it yet. And I associate it with Northern symbolism personally in so many different ways, and so that's what I get into there. So it's always cool just to kind of see it around. And then she has those stars on her head, and then she's holding what's called a globus cruciger in her left hand, which is sometimes called a holy hand grenade.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon to see the Empress or the Emperor holding that.
Yeah.
But yeah, very cool card. I like the contrast he kind of is able to get with his backgrounds and foregrounds and the shadows and stuff like that. I don't know, it kind of packs a punch.
Yeah.
So very, very cool. I like this one. And here we have a few more cards.
Yep.
Judgment, the Fool, and the World card.
Yep. I guess mostly I just wanted to, draw more of the connection back to Picard. Again, we see the Fool being associated with Shin and with Scorpio. And Judgment and the world being on either side of the Fool as far as the Hebrew alphabet. Line.
Gotcha. Right. Wow. That World card is intense, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because generally what you're going to see, I mean, this really breaks away from tradition in like a few different ways.
Yeah.
But you usually see something oval or circular implying the heavens. Here you see something that's squared or cubed. And then you see these three, I'm assuming three women, and they're all chained, what looks like to a masculine figure. That's kind of my take, at least.
Yeah.
But, do you see more feminine or masculine with that face back there?
I would say masculine, but.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, it looks like there's another figure, too, that's kind of laying down
yes,
right
like,
in front of the face,
like on
right?
a bed. Yeah.
Right. So there's four figures,
Mm.
I'm assuming, that are chained to this character here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know what that blotch
Yeah.
is on the right hand side, but that's
Yeah.
interesting. Um, there's so much to be said about the cube and the square,
Uh-huh.
and how it potentially relates to Earth, the world itself. People say the four corners of Earth, right? Or there's this idea that there's four pillars on Earth that hold up the heavens. So the cross, the square, a lot to be said about how that relates to Earth. When I was on that Fleur de Lis stream,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Narco Longo, Old World Florida, he was bringing up the correspondence with Venus and the number four. And just for the reasons I just mentioned, Earth relating to the number four,
Mm-hmm.
that is interesting. Also, Venus rules Taurus, right? And you see the Taurus
Mm-hmm.
glyph
Mm-hmm.
right there. So
Yep.
I think there's something to be said about that.
Yeah.
Venus corresponding with Taurus, Venus corresponding with the number four, the
Yep.
number four corresponding to Earth or the
Uh-huh.
world, and
Uh-huh.
there's four female figures here.
Yeah.
So perhaps he was tapping into some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then the Fool card there, I mean, it almost looks like, well, he's on horseback, so
Mm-hmm.
he's not necessarily walking, but the
Mm-hmm.
horse is, a very, very potent symbol related to travel.
Mm-hmm.
So as it
Yeah.
relates to the Fool, I think that makes a lot of sense. But it almost kind of looks like he has a spiritual double here,
Yeah. Huh.
or an invisible twin,
Yeah.
or perhaps a holy guardian
Yeah.
angel, or
Yeah.
something along these lines. His
Yeah.
Ka.
Yeah.
That's what the Egyptians used to refer to some of these things as. So
Yeah.
there's that, and then he's kind of glowing with this yellow, implying this relationship to the sun, I would say, which generally is kind of a customary thing with the Fool. But there's also this air correspondence that usually comes with the Fool, and I'm just kind of seeing it be played out here with the butterfly symbolism.
Yeah.
you know so that's intriguing. And then also it looks like he's holding a trident as
Mm-hmm.
well. That's very interesting. And then the judgment card here. Oh wow. Yeah, more butterfly symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
The angel blowing its horn, its trumpet, and then the figures. You wouldn't necessarily know they're kind of rising from the a tomb or a crypt
Yeah.
or something, but that's the implication if you know your tarot.
Yeah.
And then it kind of looks like that base. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm.
If people know what that
Nice.
looks like,
Yeah.
which is usually sort of topped with two angels with these
Right.
long wings, but it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And it looks like he likes to use the collage method as well
Yeah.
for some of these cards. So
Yeah.
maybe that is the base of the Ark of the Covenant. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It very well could be.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, these definitely get me thinking, dude. Especially
Yeah.
that world one. I'm gonna have to sit on this one.
Yeah. Cool.
Nice. All right. Awesome. And then I don't know if this is from your other email with additional cards, but I just threw them in here since they're Dali cards.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I with this one I just threw this in there because I loved the way he signs his card,
Yeah. Right.
because it looks like a sigil or like a Solomonic seal. It's like,
It does.
you know
He had to have been
he knew-
thinking about that.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. He's he was
Right.
he was familiar with this stuff.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Gotcha. All right. And then the Three of Swords here.
Yeah, and so this is kind of where Dali strays from Picard and the other Spanish decks, because in his minors really seem to draw a lot from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and
Right.
and and this is one of the most famous of the Rider-Waite-Smith cards. The Three of Swords.
Mm.
The very familiar image of three swords piercing a heart.
Right. Right. Yeah. And there's a whole little myth going on in there.
Mm-hmm.
So good and evil. Looks like there's a princess, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. This might actually, and I'm just spacing on the myth, but this is probably referring to a very specific myth, would be my
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But I see that long spear.
Mm-hmm.
you
Yep.
know, um, I did a presentation called Decoding Chaos,
Mm.
and I get into this idea of chaos being defeated in
Yeah.
part with a world axis symbol.
Ah.
And that's kind of
Mhm.
the implication, I think, a lot of the time. So,
Interesting.
um, darkness being defeated with this symbol that always is associated with order, authority,
Yeah.
stability, structure, these types of things.
Yeah.
So, interesting. Nice.
Yeah. I know this the specific piece of work that he drew on to create this particular card. I know it illustrates a story of Roger, and I'm not sure who Roger is. I don't, unfortunately, I don't know the mythology of Roger, and I can't remember the woman's name. Um, but to me, it immediately reminds me of like the story of Saint George fighting the dragon, and
It looks like it, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I wonder if the story of Roger was something similar to that.
Right. Right. Totally. Totally. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I wonder Andromeda kind of comes to mind. Some of her
Mm.
mythology.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be related here,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. But I'm sure people are kind of letting us know in the comments, maybe.
yeah.
Hopefully. All right. Wow. So he really liked to. Did he do this for all of the minor cards? Like encode a little myth or
Yeah, that's a good question.
a little storyline or something like that?
I can't recall, but I think that I feel like it is pretty prominent through the
Wow.
writers. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So here we have the Two of Cups.
Hmm. And again, obviously drawing some inspiration from the Rider Waite Smith deck.
Sure, sure. Yeah, exactly, right. With the lion with the wings and the
Hmm.
serpents and everything, right? Totally. Wow. I like the fact too that the border for the little scene in the middle is coming out of his signature too.
Yeah, and the border is also a face. Like you can see the
Oh
eye
yeah, right, totally.
on the abdomen of the woman. I think it's Cupid and Psyche are the characters. Um, but yeah, yeah, very
Excellent.
yeah.
Right, right. Oh man, I didn't see that face at first, and now I just can't unsee
Yeah.
it. Nice. All right, the Tower card.
Yeah. And I think that I was just drawing another comparison between Dali and Balbi to show the connection. Obviously, there's the Aries connection. I mean, the zodiacal glyph is clear. On the Balbi card, you can see the head of a ram up at the upper left.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and
Yeah,
the Hebrew letter again, tying it together. So just another example of Dali tying into the same uh, thread work.
totally. And usually, if I'm not mistaken, the Tower card just associates with Mars, and Aries is ruled by Mars.
Mm-hmm.
So symbolically, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And then another thing too that I can't not see now whenever I look at any Tower card
Mm-hmm.
is this idea that in the Tower of Babel story,
Mm-hmm.
when you dive into it, the people who are actually building the tower, they were giants.
Mm.
And so now look at the proportion of those people compared to the tower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's usually the case. They're
yeah.
usually, scale wise, they're
Right.
massive,
Yeah,
absolutely huge.
yeah,
And so it makes me wonder if the people who created these decks, if they're aware of that
yeah.
or not. So
Interesting.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so wow,
definitely. Yeah, definitely with the Balbi deck, it's clear that the scale is off there. If those are supposed to be regular people.
yeah, and that's generally the case. And then, man, Dali really did an abstract sort of number here
Yeah,
with that tower,
yeah,
which God bless him. You know, interesting. There's this like black void behind
yeah,
this tower.
yeah,
And then, yeah, man, what a creative guy. I mean, he was just, I don't know, he's just an interesting dude. Things that, and that's really part of the tarot too. Obviously, it's like his stuff, it speaks more to your subconscious, right? And
hmm
so your conscious
yeah,
mind
oh,
wants to
yeah,
make sense of these things and create patterns out of
yeah.
things and everything
It's
else, but
it's very dreamy. I mean, it's very
very
yeah.
dreamy. Yeah, absolutely. Gotcha. All right. So moving on. Sweet. So actually,
All right.
dude, before we get into this, do you mind if I just hit the restroom real quick?
No, yeah, I'll probably do the same.
Okay, right on. You just want to take a little break then?
Um, no, I'm good. I mean, I'll just be right back. I'm just actually just gonna fill up. Like,
Okay, gotcha. All right, guys, we're gonna take like I'll be back in like 30 seconds or something. We'll be right back. All right, as we were.
all right, awesome.
So this is the deck I was excited to talk about.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So how about you introduce it to the people?
So this is sorry. This is El Gran Tarot Esoterico. Did I get that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Awesome. And another contemporary deck to the Balbi deck. I believe this was published in 1976, which I think was the same year as Balbi. This was a collaboration between, and I'll probably mispronounce these, Meritsu Erlans de Guler and Luis Pena Longo. Or Longa. Luis Pena Longa was, I believe, the artist, and Meritsu Erlans de Guler oversaw and directed the creation of the deck. And again, she obviously took some inspiration from Picard.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's the egg symbolism once again,
Mhm.
and egg symbolism is massive. I mean, it's just like the eye or something,
Mhm.
right? Or the seed. And so, and all of those symbols are very much related. But you see that egg right there with a little dot in the middle
Mhm.
as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So it makes a little circumpunct, or it
Mhm.
makes the glyph of the sun,
Mhm.
right? And then you've got the butterfly right there, implying the air correspondence. And
Yeah,
then opposite, you have the swords, but you have all of this watery symbolism, this lunar
yeah,
symbolism, this
yeah.
Cancerian sort of thing going on here.
Yep, and we got the Scorpio glyph and the where the swords are coming to their point.
Right, right. And so this is the deck that Dave sent me, and I'm so into it. And so when you guys watch or check out the majors, I think you guys will dig it too. But there's like I don't know, the way I kind of described it. Maybe I'll hold off for a second until we get to one of my more favorite cards, I guess. But there's something to be said about just the aesthetic quality of the deck. I really appreciate for a few different reasons. So just like we've gone over already, yeah, this is absolutely in line with the Spanish tradition for sure. And do you know when this was made by chance? I don't know
Uh,
if he said it already.
76, 1976, I believe.
Okay, gotcha. So that was the same time as the Balbi, eh?
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
So here we have the Fool card and the Magician.
Mm-hmm. Or El Con, excuse me, Consultante.
Yep. Right, right. So I mean, personally, what I'm always on the lookout for
Mm-hmm.
are decks with major arcanas
Mm-hmm.
that in one way it's like I want to have the best of both worlds. I want to have a deck, or I'm looking for decks that follow some of the traditional elements that I really appreciate about older decks, because the tarot tradition, it encodes certain things that make a lot of sense. Some of the symbolic aspects of these cards have been refined literally over centuries for good reason. Yet I want the deck to introduce new stuff.
Yeah.
I want the major arcana to give me new symbolism to think about and consider, and I want it to give me new wrinkles
Yeah.
to this whole entire thing. And I think this deck does a really good job doing that.
Yeah.
Where there's enough traditional stuff that kind of gets my respect in a way, and I think it's like rooted in a way. Yet there are new things that it's introducing to me as well. And so that's what I see with the major arcana here in most of the cards. And so, I mean, as an example, I really like the spiraling nature of the magician card there. There's a lot to be said about the spiral. I've said
then that same sort of spiral motif also features in his judgment card, which she calls El Ciclo, or the cycle. And I believe it also, if I recall correctly, I believe it also shows planets in a spiral.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. So here you see within the spiral, there's 7 traditional planets. Obviously, they're trying to make a correspondence between the planets and the different parts of the body, I would say. And then there's something to be said about Mercury relating to spirals and things that spin. And so I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and there are works of art that show Mercury with a wheel or like a gear that spins. And so when you're talking about spinning, I mean, it's just like the spinning of the cosmos, right? Or the spinning of our energetic body, our Taurus field. And so there's a lot to be said about that, this idea of the spiral sort of nature of things, and all of the things that the spiral encodes. There's just truly it goes on and on and on. But I like the fact that they included that. I think it's interesting that he's also holding an ankh as well, down below, which I'm just looking now, but the ankh is in line with the tradition that relates it to the Tau cross. So Tau as in Taurus. And then here we have Aleph that it corresponds with. You can see it on the right-hand side. And Aleph is an ox. So the ox is just a castrated bull.
Yeah.
And so there's bull symbolism here that I find intriguing. And then, of course, they have the sun, in the upper left there. And then with the Fool card, I mean, a lot of the traditional symbolism is there. I was going to ask you, what kind of critter do you think is chomping at his leg?
I don't know. To me, it looks like a cat.
Yeah, which would make sense. And we saw the tiger earlier.
Yeah.
It looks like a hungry cat, maybe.
Yeah.
Or it kind of, to me, it looks. I think you're right. I think ultimately it's a cat. It does kind of look rat-like though, as well. And then the fact that he's holding corn too, I think is very, very interesting. Just emphasizing kind of the phallic nature of that wand.
Yeah.
And then he has little horns there. He's got those, kind of elvish ears. I think that's interesting as well. And then he also has what looks like 3 like cowbells or something attached to him, right?
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, as I just said, Aleph means ox. That's a castrated bull. Traditionally, Aleph corresponds with the Fool. So if it's a cowbell, I just think that's kind of appropriate. And then also he has that little dunce cap sort of
Yeah.
thing too, which I think is funny. But yeah, lots of stuff to get into with all of these different things,
Yeah.
actually. But very cool. I like it. And then moving on here, so we have the Judgment card and then the World card.
Yep. Yeah. So I forgot I had included that, but yeah, the Ciclo, not that spiral isn't quite as prominent, I guess, as the Magician card, but I definitely love the way the sun and moon are being presented there with some real movement around the scene.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that the I don't even know what kind of building it would be.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's just
It's
a
like
facade.
It's just a facade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. I like that symbolism. That's very, very interesting. And then you can kind of tell what looks like those lines in the background. It implies, I think, probably the cycle of the sun and the moon.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like showing you their course in the heavens.
Yeah.
Right. And then it looks like you've got a Pisces glyph and then an Aquarius glyph. And then it looks like you have a Saturnian glyph on the stone, which actually makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah.
And then you've got the glyph of Venus there on that building, the facade.
Yep.
Nice. Very, very different take from what I'm accustomed to.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate it. And then kind of standard stuff here a little bit on the right-hand side with the world.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, you have an androgynous figure here, right? Man and woman. And then you've got obviously they're like emphasizing it with the sun and the moon there as well. And so it's more of I would say more of a mercurial figure that way.
Yeah.
And then she has, or he has, they have the drapes on the sides of its shoulders there with the 5-pointed stars. Very, very interesting. And then everything else kind of looks normal-ish.
Yeah.
Notice that this figure is standing on land and not on water.
Yeah.
Like we
saw
earlier.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their ribbon or sash, it reminds me of like a priest's vestments.
Yeah. Definitely. Nice. 3 steps. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, just as a side note, if you notice the numbering at the top of the cards, you see there is a card missing between them, which again would be the Fool. So
Excellent. Right. Yeah, you got it. I was just going to point out the 3 steps. The 3 steps leading up to that facade there. And 3 steps, it just reminds me of some stuff related to the Freemasonic tradition and things along those lines. I'm sure it was very strategic. 3 steps and the 4 pillars and everything else. But nice. Awesome. Well, let's see what's going on with the next set of cards here. So we've got the Wheel of Fortune, and then the Star card, and then the Sun card.
Yeah. Pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, very different. Exactly. So, I mean, there's a lot to say about a lot of what's going on here, but I have to geek out on the Wheel of Fortune real quick.
Yeah, please.
That was the one where when you sent that to me, the card on the left, I was like, whoa, this is really, really intriguing.
Yeah.
Because I see more northern polar symbolism.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned in an email, right, that the wheel looks like a, I believe you said this, but it looks like a mill, like a
it's like a grindstone. Yep.
It's a grindstone, yeah. And that's a classic sort of metaphor for the spinning of the cosmos. There's a book called Hamlet's Mill, and it's all about the spinning of the cosmos. And you don't have just one symbol here that spins. You've got another one with that monkey holding that pinwheel.
Yeah.
And so the idea, personally, the way I tend to break things down is people argue about flat Earth, round Earth, everything else. To me, the argument hinges on the fact of what's spinning? That's the main
Yeah.
question.
Oh, interesting.
What's spinning? The ground underneath our feet
Right.
or the heavens above? To me, that's kind of what it all distills down to. And so the spin, in my opinion, we are not spinning, but the cosmos is spinning. And so the stars above us are spinning, right? And so they're all spinning around the pole star, Polaris, which is
Mm-hmm.
also known as the sky nail or nail star because it's the
Mm.
pin
Yeah.
in the symbolic pinwheel, or
Uh-huh.
it's the
Oh,
axle in the symbolic wheel of the heavens that
wow.
is rotating around and around and around.
Yeah.
And so the two closest constellations to the pole star, symbolically, metaphorically, have been for a very, very long time Ursa Major and Ursa Minor,
Mm-hmm.
which are the Great Bear and the Little Bear, right? And here you have a polar bear, and
Mm-hmm.
both of those constellations are circumpolar
Yeah.
because they're close to the pole star. And so when I see polar bears, I think of those two constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, going around the pole star, going around the world axis, which has a very, very, very strong correspondence to the world tree, right? And so the world tree, the trunk of the world tree is the axis. It is the cosmic axle that everything revolves around, in my opinion. And this trunk of the world tree or the cosmic axis, this axle, is the bridge between realms. It's what Mercury, Hermes, Thoth uses as a psychopomp to go from domain to domain, from place to place, right? And
Nice.
so one of Thoth's or Mercury or Hermes animals is the ape. And so you will actually see an ape in the magician card, which corresponds with Mercury in the Thoth deck, as an
Oh,
example.
nice.
And my understanding too is in Vedic mythology, Hanuman, the monkey man, the ape god, he is their Mercury. He
Hmm.
is their Hermes. So I think Hermes Mercury can be seen all over the place, but he's also known as a divine androgyne. That
Mm.
Mercury is both highly feminine and highly masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one of the core sort of ideas behind Mercury. And what do you see up top? You see like these two faces looking
Yep.
away from each other, like Janus. And so you have these two sides, the passive and the projective, the masculine, the feminine, black and white, all these different things. So to me, they're also corresponding it right there with Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. And so they've picked up on the symbolism of Mercury relating to spin and movement. He's the messenger of the gods, all of these types of things, and it's just kind of all baked into in there in that card. And then you even see these two wheels right below those squares in the
Mm-hmm.
upper right hand and left hand corners.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so that's how I tend to see it. So when I saw this card, you sent it to me, I got all kinds of excited, dude.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah, so that's what I see. What's going on there? And man, I mean, some of the other stuff going on with these two other cards, I might have to sit on this for a little bit.
Yeah. 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 Particularly for me, the Sun card. Uh, I'm very, very intrigued by the three serpents, but I
Sure.
don't know what to make of that.
Right, right. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there's this idea of a triune god, or that
Yeah.
all gods are kind of triune. There's like a masculine, feminine, and perhaps like a third quality, like a childlike quality, or something that transcends
Mm-hmm.
both of the other qualities, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be alluding to the triune nature of the sun itself.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing something in the sun card that usually gets attributed to the moon card,
Yeah.
and it is these droplets
Yeah.
going from
Yeah.
earth to that luminary, the
Right.
sun in this case.
Right.
And you usually see that with the moon, and I think that makes a lot of sense because I've generally associated the moon with being more receptive and feminine in nature,
Yeah.
but people have different opinions about that. So
Yeah.
some people think that the moon is actually more masculine and the sun is actually more feminine. And
Yeah.
here it is receiving those droplets.
Yeah.
So I've kind of looked at those droplets as souls or just
Yeah.
energy from the people here on Earth.
Yeah.
and then you see the two figures,
Mm-hmm.
which generally associate with the Gemini twins, and they're usually
Mm-hmm.
in front of a wall, and you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
see a wall back there a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen them sitting down like this though.
Yeah.
Generally they're standing, and generally they're holding hands or something along those lines.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we also do see a moon as well. Um, you know, but but between them.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's true. Exactly. For sure.
Hmm.
Much smaller, but
Yeah.
there it is. It's undeniable. And then also there's something to be said about the colors of the serpents as well, for
Mm-hmm.
sure, and then the spiral nature or quality of them. Yeah, that's a loaded card, man. There's a lot
Yeah.
going on there. Same thing with the star card, I would say,
Yeah.
as well, right? So you got that star, the pentacle, looks very sun-like, but it has this tail,
Yeah.
and so it has this tail, and the tail ends with three tips, and you see Jupiter, Mars, and then Saturn in the
Mm-hmm.
tips, and then on the right hand side you see a rather large Mercury glyph.
Yeah.
So very interesting,
Yeah.
very different from the norm.
Yeah.
Nice. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm going to have to chew on some of the symbolism here, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
Like with the star card, I've looked at it and I've tried to figure out, was she trying to represent it like a comet, or is this more just uh, uh, a more abstract way of displaying a constellation?
Mm.
You know.
The comet thing, excuse me, the comet thing makes sense.
Yeah.
So sometimes the tail is referred to as like a beard,
Mm-hmm.
a beard of the comet, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
In this case, it almost looks like a comet coming from Earth and then coming back down to Earth,
Mm.
in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, intriguing to say
Yeah.
the least. Got it. Well, let's see what's going on. Well, actually, here we are. We're 2 hours and 20 minutes into it. One of the last things I requested was potentially, well, actually, there's a handful of cards actually left still. So I have some Cancer cards because we're in Cancer season. We can cruise through that.
Yep.
And then there's also some additional cards that you have here. Do you want to proceed and open up the final can of worms here, or you want to? Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, let's look at. Yeah, I at least want to look at the Cancer cards.
Okay, nice. So we are in Cancer season. So I asked him to pull out some of the Cancer cards and what they correspond with. And here we have a correspondence that I know other people agree with, that I've looked into, and it's that Cancer may very well correspond with the Moon card better than anything else.
Yeah.
You guys might be aware that the Chariot card is generally what corresponds with Cancer. I've also heard people make the case that the Moon card should just correspond with the Moon itself.
Yeah.
But most often you're going to see it, I believe, correspond with Pisces. So here we have a fairly traditional Moon card. But you see that Cancer glyph in the lower right-hand corner, and all of the symbolism is there for the most part. Those little droplets coming from Earth up to the Moon, and then the two dogs. Lots to be said about the dogs. Sometimes it's two Anubis figures, and then that lobster crayfish sort of thing in a pool of water. And so very much implying this middle way, this middle path, transcendence, ascension. And according to my research, people have long associated the Moon with being the first gateway out of here. That if you're going to travel the cosmos, that you might want to make a pit stop at the Moon before you go anywhere else.
Yeah.
Therefore, when you return, the last gate back is also the Moon. So that's a whole tradition right there. So I always think about that whenever I see this card. And here we've got another take. Oh, I love the fact that the lobster is crawling away from the Moon towards us.
Yeah. It's like he's crawling out of the card itself. Yep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Very cool. I'm
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, similar symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
You are getting this interesting sort of thing with this moon up top being yellow and then the one down below being red,
Mm.
almost implying maybe two moons
Mm.
or something along those lines. I'm not sure. And then even the little area the lobster's crawling out of, it kind of
Yeah.
looks like a Vesca Pisces
Yeah.
sort of thing, almost like a little eyeball or yoni or something.
Yeah, and the thing that always seems weird to me when I look at this card is that it doesn't look like the water portion doesn't look like it's, a lake shore or whatever you typically see. It looks like it's subterranean. To me, it looks like it's beneath where the dogs are.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I could see that now that you pointed out.
Yeah.
And then you've got, instead of two towers exactly, it's kind of like two homes maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of the droplets being obviously going from Earth towards the moon, you see these little dots, which you kind of used to see more actually in older decks, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But there you go. That's the Cancer correspondence, the moon.
Cool.
And then that Hebrew letter up in the upper right, it's Ayin, which means eye.
Mm.
So that's kind of intriguing as well. And then maybe that's related to that eye symbolism down below.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then, yeah, no, I think that'll do it, actually. And then here's the Dali correspondence. Interesting. Wow. So you've got that moon behind the building, and then you've got whatever that is, kind of this egg-like sort of thing in the upper left, but then it's corded to that lobster or crayfish, but it's also going in between the two dogs, and it's also leading you towards a body of water.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting. So there is a thing, this transcendence sort of thing, going on to me, but it's not going directly to the moon. It's going somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what it appears like to me, at least.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting.
Right. And then this is the card that I use for the thumbnail, the Justice card. And here they're corresponding Justice with Cancer. And he's holding a little child right there. And he has the sword up top, right, in his other hand. And so, man, I mean, honestly, I had a few revelations about this card last night when I was making the thumbnail. And it reminds me of a lot of different things. There is an implied sacrificial thing here, obviously, which relates to this concept of the first fruit, being the firstborn son being sacrificed, which is very much related to Aries, relates to Christ. There is a Christ correspondence with the constellation of Cancer. There's a little asterism within Cancer that's called the manger, actually. And then Jupiter is also exalted in Cancer. And Jupiter has a huge thing with Christ as well that you can get into. So I don't know. That little child right there, though, in the middle, very, very interesting. And I'm going to save some of my thoughts on it, actually, because I just don't want to speak too soon until I've really chewed on it. But the more I've looked at this card, the more I'm kind of picking up that's kind of epic and weird that I'll probably share at some point.
Cool.
But yeah, so that's the Justice card right there.
Awesome.
Right. Okay.
And this was the one that that when I first saw these cards, my first thought was Stella Maris.
Right. Oh, dude, 100%. I see that all day long. Yeah, I mean, she usually, the Virgin Mary, it's not uncommon for her to be standing on top of a crescent.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I gotcha. Especially, I would say, especially the one on the left for some reason.
Right. Yeah. Her robes definitely look more, Virgin Mary, or
Right, right. She's more veiled
yeah,
than the other two as well, I would
yeah,
say. Yeah, yeah. Good call. Man. Well, dude, I have a much better understanding of the system now. So,
awesome,
mission accomplished on my end.
awesome,
Yeah, yeah. So very cool. I see exactly what you're saying here.
cool,
And then these are some of the other random cards too that you sent
yeah,
at the tail end of things. So you want to cruise through these? There's only a few.
yeah, yeah. I put this one in just because I think it's so badass looking.
Wow, yeah.
I just love everything going on in that.
Dang. That is very interesting. I mean, generally you are going to see three figures, one going up, one up top, and one coming down, but they really, really just emphasized and kind of just created their own little world here with these characters.
Yeah.
With their design and everything else, and also what's within the wheel. I'm noticing right now that the wheel itself is like an Ouroboros. Right, and then you got the four cherubim angels, the tetramorphs, in the middle of the wheel, which generally are on the corners of this card. And the figures going, they're all there where they're supposed to be. So one figure going up, the one up top is generally the Sphinx, which is what you see here, and then the one down below, the one who's going down, tends to be the most evil looking one.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of sticking to tradition with that. But yeah, that's a killer card, dude. I like that.
Yeah. Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's the King of Swords from the Crystal Tarot.
Oh, right. Wow, man. Very, very cool. This is such an inspiring deck.
Yeah.
I love the two fish down below, right by the tip of the sword there.
Yeah.
Got it. Nice. And then, lastly, we have this card here.
And that's and that's also from the Crystal Tarot, and that's her version of the Devil card, and that's of these Spanish decks. Her version of the Devil is the most unique, and I feel like it's the one that in which she varies the most from the rest, with the rest of her cards, because all the other Devil cards, they're either very reminiscent of the Marseille deck, or they're depictions of like Baphomet. But yeah, this one, she doesn't do either of those. And I thought that was an interesting choice for her. Definitely.
One of the little details I'm noticing is that he is serpentine in nature with his serpent legs. That's kind of what I'm picking up a little bit, at least. And so that's a whole line of mythology that I generally associate with the Chariot card. And so if you notice the Charioteer, a lot of the times, especially in older decks, he's not visible from the waist down.
Right.
And so you actually cannot see his legs. And so there's a story about a Greek king named Erichthonius. And Erichthonius was born with serpent legs. And he is credited, this mythology credits him for being the first, the inventor of the four-horsed chariot called the quadriga. And so he invented the first four-horse chariot so that he can get around because he has serpent legs. Wow. And it was dual function because it covered up his legs, which he was ashamed of.
Oh, wow.
And so this is a whole line of mythology. So sometimes whenever I see the chariot card, I'm like, dude, I think that there's something to be said here. And it might have something to do with the fact that man symbolically has a serpent between his legs below the waist as well. Yeah. And so anyways, but that's kind of what I'm picking up here. I've made a couple of videos about it, actually. If people check out my cancer playlist, you guys should check that out. And then the fact that, he's bald or has a shaved head, I think is really interesting. I've seen another devil card that does the exact same thing. And I'll be damned if that devil card doesn't look exactly like me. It's
Oh,
so wild. I have to scan it and send it to you. I think everybody here would actually agree. It's hilarious. The first time I saw it, I was like, whoa, what the hell? I'm like, I look exactly like the devil.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, very cool, man. I love it. This
Cool.
is really, really awesome. This deck is absolutely on my radar for sure.
Nice.
Well, with all of that said, dude, thank you so much
Yeah.
for hanging out.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you
any
for
Go ahead.
letting me on and letting me share some of these decks that I really want to pump up and get the word out on some of these.
Yeah, dude, you got it, man. And if there's ever another sort of topic, or I don't know, if there's ever another sort of thread that you want to pull at related to the tarot or some of your decks or whatever, let me know, and we can do it again. But
Yeah.
do you have any final thoughts about everything here? You're more than welcome to plug something. I know this isn't even necessarily what you do or whatever, so I don't know if you even want to be contacted, or if I don't think you have any social media or anything like that.
Yeah,
Right?
no, I don't really have any social media presence. I have an email. If people want to email me, it's moonlander2@protonmail.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody if they want to talk about any of these decks or tarot in general, or any other esoteric subjects they might want to talk about. Particularly, if people have questions about these decks, or if they have answers about these decks, I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally encourage people, if you do have any questions or insights or thoughts, or there's decks that you think you should check out, reach out and get in touch for sure. Well, awesome, man. Thank you for all of the work too that you put into this. Just taking photos and putting together PDFs and sending it my way and all of that. That was very, very helpful. And obviously, it wouldn't have made sense to do this without visuals. So
Awesome.
they were much needed and necessary today.
Cool.
All right, man. Well, we'll be in touch, okay?
Yeah. And happy birthday.
Oh, thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. All right, have a good weekend.
You too.
All right,
Bye.
see you. Bye. Cool. Well, that was fun. I learned a lot, I think. Not I think, I know. I'm just turning down the light here. Nice. Well, I do have a few things to announce now that we're at this portion of everything. And so just once again, thank you for being here, first of all, especially if you hung out the whole time. That's awesome. Hopefully you guys learned some stuff as well. I think that, well, because now I have this El Gran Esoterico deck, I'm totally going to put that into any future presentation that I do about any of these cards. So you guys will see that and other cards from that deck. But if you liked what you're seeing, if you liked what you saw, you can support via Patreon. You can become a patron at patreon.com/symbolicstudies. Once again, just want to thank all of my current patrons, all 25 of you. You guys are awesome, or I believe maybe 26 now. But regardless, much appreciated. I have an elemental study packet that I'm actually currently refining and adding to. And so my goal is actually to double the study packet. So from 4 pages to 8 pages. And so right now, if you guys want this current version, you guys can basically send me a donation, or you can sign up for my Patreon. So anytime someone signs up, I send them the study packet. You guys can print it out, share it with friends, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of good correspondences in there for sure. Or like I said, it's a donation-based thing. If you don't want to sign up for my Patreon, that's totally cool too. Also, Symbolic Studios, that is just what I call my design work, pretty much. So if anyone is interested in any design service, if you have a small business or you've got a social media presence and you need a logo or artwork, or you need packaging, things like that, I've been a graphic designer for 20 years now. And I've done everything under the sun when it comes to design. That is my bread and butter. So if you guys have any need for that, please reach out. And if we're a good fit, we're a good fit. I also have posters. So this is my, speaking of design and artwork and all that kind of stuff, this is my Gemini print. And so I went like all Gemini season, and I don't think I mentioned it once, but this is my Gemini print. So these are silk screened by hand. This run is like pretty much limited. Like there's no way that I can print these things the same way that I printed them beforehand. So once these are gone, this particular release, once these are gone, these are totally gone. I sign them by hand. This is another way to get a study packet. I include a physical printed study packet and also a bookmark, and you can find these on my Etsy. They also come too with a symbolic breakdown sheet. So I literally explain the symbolism of what's going on here. So the idea behind these prints was to design a print, a piece of art that could be used to explain a lot of the symbolic elements associated with the sign. And so there is a ton of Gemini symbolism here. And speaking of the egg, egg symbolism, I definitely encoded that in here because it's been said that the Gemini twins are born from a cosmic egg. And so that's why you see these ovals, and these egg shapes all over the place. I'm also available for tarot readings and study sessions. So you can text me at 503-893-4606 if you're so inclined. Tarot readings, I have a very flexible style. It's more organic. I kind of let things unfurl naturally. It's very conversational as well. It's very symbolic. So if you like kind of the way I teach or I decode, you're going to learn a lot, hopefully, during our session. Similarly, study sessions, people have hit me up for all sorts of things with study sessions. People have just wanted one-on-one time to talk about symbolism. They've wanted to know more about the tarot or a certain sign. All sorts of different things. So basically, if you think I can help you on your symbolic journey, reach out and we'll make something happen. Snail mail. So if you guys want to send me anything, a letter or whatnot, a tarot deck, a book, you can do so. P.O. Box 930, Carson, Washington, 98610. Very happy to say over the last couple of months, people have been sending things. So it's been really, really cool that people are making use of that. So much, much appreciated. Also, my girlfriend has a podcast. It's called The Healing Home. So she goes live every Tuesday at 4 p.m. And she is an herbalist. She's a homemaker and so much more. But she's done, I think it's been like 30-something episodes now. And so she's available. All of her stuff is available here on YouTube at Michelle's Healing Home. Also, you can find her on Spotify and iTunes and things like that. And we also have a podcast together. So it's called Last Thursday Live. And so every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, we get together and we talk and we hang with the chat. And right now, actually, we're 3 episodes into what we're calling our Summer of Love series, where we are kind of unpacking the counterculture movement of the 1960s and the Charles Manson narrative. And so Michelle has read like every Manson book that's out there. And so she knows a lot about that stuff. And our last episode that we did last night was all about acid. We talked about acid, LSD, right? And just kind of how it was proliferated throughout the 60s. And, we talked about the acid tests. We talked about Woodstock, the Grateful Dead, all sorts of different things related to it. So if that sounds intriguing, you guys should definitely check it out. And for everything else, you guys can go to symbolicstudies.com, which I am currently revamping. So probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks, there will be a new website. Also, a little announcement too. So I'm starting a proper podcast, a proper audio only podcast. I've wanted to for a long time, and now's the time. And so I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with this guy named GB Marion. and he is a Setian. And so literally his belief system has everything to do with the Egyptian god Set. And Set has been a deity that I've been interested in over the last, I would say, probably 2 or 3 years specifically, because he has a correspondence of all things with the northern sky. They say that he exists behind Ursa Major, and that Ursa Major is his mother. Excuse me, Ursa Major is his mother. And so when I found out that there was all this northern sky stuff with Set, I had to learn more. So I've read several books about him, and I've gotten into it in different, on different podcasts and platforms and things like that. And, it was probably a year and a half ago or something like that. I came across GB Marion's work. I listened to his podcasts. He's very enthusiastic and into this information. And so I hit him up and we had a good conversation. And that'll be released, I would say probably within the next handful of days, 3 or 4 days or so. And you guys are going to have to excuse me. I'm still having respiratory issues, if you haven't noticed. So shortness of breath is definitely a thing over here. And then also, too, I mentioned it earlier, but I did a presentation on Old World Florida with Juan Ayala of the Juan on Juan podcast. Shout out Longo and Juan. Solid dudes. I really appreciate both of them for a bunch of different reasons, but they gave me the opportunity to talk about the fleur-de-lis. And so I go all in on the fleur-de-lis. If you think this symbol is interesting, if you've seen it around, I don't know. I think you guys should check it out because it goes beyond, maybe what you guys might expect. Lots of Virgo symbolism, lots of northern polar symbolism, I find within it. Tree of Life, World Tree stuff, for sure. We also talk about Florida. So Old World Florida, he's doing a lot of amazing research and producing lots of interesting content based around what he refers to as Old World Florida, like the hidden history of Florida, the esoteric side of Florida. What's the real history of Florida besides what maybe the mainstream might tell us? What's the real history of this country besides what you hear, at school? Very deep stuff, man. I mean, there's just so much going on with it that I don't know. I like what he's doing. And so I was thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to him. That'll do it though, guys. So thank you once again. You all are appreciated, and I will see you next time. All right, guys, have a good weekend. Take care.